Well, I think what we have learned now is that everyone we're seeing on the global stage, they they are controlled, they are puppets of whatever masters to whom they serve. It's not the people. And I think now we see it more than ever. And I keep saying this to my, audience on my channel, like everyone are every one of these people, they are players.
Monaco 64, home of alternative economics and contrarian views. Today I have a special guest. It's Jennifer Arcuri. Hi, Jennifer. How are you?
Hi, Mario. I'm great. How are you?
Great. And Jennifer has been a follower of my channel. I've been on one of her podcasts about 2 years ago. So, Jennifer, maybe you can tell the viewers your background and where you are and where you've been in the last decade or so.
Sure, we can start there.
Yeah.
I came over to London for an MBA program in 2011 and then graduated in 2012. And I had a number of projects, entrepreneurial projects, where I gained a visa to stay in the UK and build these small, tech companies. And a few of my companies took me on trade missions and also had DCMS come to my door asking if they could give us a grant for the security work we were doing, placing students, since the UK had such a vast and still does gap in cybersecurity skills. So the quota was to place 50 students within 24 months, and we had 36 already underway, and we were training the Ministry of Defense on site. So we were, and we had some, incredible clients, from the get go. So we were doing a lot of great work in security, and that's why you saw the media make me their target. So they use the bottom feeding narrative to tell people that I was somehow gifted special favor because of, the relationship that I had with Boris Johnson, knowing this person, and having him come to my events also fed their, desire to create a great tale around the work I did. And the truth is, he loved my events, as did everyone. There was nothing like my events. And you can still watch them on YouTube, but they were just very powerful and impactful events that brought together startups and corporates and policymakers. We did a discussion actually at Houses of Parliament in 2014. The event was called Tech versus Brains, about the eradication of the middle class and how AI and this theory of singularity and the adoption of technology would be eradicating these. I mean, I was kind of banging the drums for skills back in the day, reaching out to politicians across the board. I know they love to say that it was always Boris Johnson, but there were many other politicians I worked with. That event, George Freeman actually, and look, I don't have a very high regard for any politician these days, but at the time, it was an incredible way to foster tech innovation and bring talent and attract financial investment to London, which was ultimately what we were doing. And we were very good at it.
Yeah, and Boris
So,
Johnson at the time, he was the mayor of London, right?
yeah. So actually, he was being thrown scripts going on talking about, the Olympics and everything. So, and tech had become a big part of London by that point, but it was all very brand new. And I remember talking to him early on. He's like, I'm expected to know all of these things. They explain it to me. It still doesn't make sense. He said, Jen, what's a hashtag? Like, really? And this was back in the day. And you said, tell me something to say. About the Olympics, the tech. So he really didn't understand what was actually happening and why attracting innovation and great leaders and minds and talent and creating or fostering a legislative or the regulatory environment to give out entrepreneur visas, to create small seed, budget, to fund these small startups. I mean, all of that was critical in the early days. And a lot of great companies came from that. TransferWise, Wise was, there's a lot of, great companies now in the fintech, especially because London was known for that. My events, fintech was a big part of the work I did, especially within security, because, my team were, actually working with all the banks at the time and, designing the security and the architecture for these major banks down in Canary Wharf. So when I started producing these events and bringing the security world in with the cabinet office, with DCMS, I mean, people loved it. They loved the fluidity, the transparency. There was a lot of great work done, a lot of meetings, that happened off those events. So naturally, there was a great magnetic force that came, from my events, and people loved them. And, that's why I was around and did so much. And London and Partners loved having me. They had me at all their events because I was the network they needed. They love to say in the press, that New York trip, by the way, that New York mission, that I was there on special favor because of Boris Johnson. And I roll my eyes and laugh. I'm like, they only understood at the time. London and Partners was, throwing these massive breakfast events and attracting those entrepreneurs in New York. They wanted entrepreneurs that turned over 2 million or more and wanted to set up an office in London. They needed people on the ground to go find those entrepreneurs. I was one of them. So I brought them those companies they were looking for. WeWork, early days WeWork, when it was just setting up in London. I was bringing them over to London, introducing them to people, etc. So that's why I was at all those trade missions. I had a, incredible network. And people wanted to bring in the best and the brightest with the capital investment into London. So that's why you saw me at all these events and trade missions. But yeah, just to introduce what I do, I mean,
Yeah.
that's kind of where the press had their
Yeah.
go at. Yeah. Thank you
So
for letting me speak.
yeah, maybe you could we could jump forward because what it seems to me is that you were uh like in the belly of the beast, so to speak. You were connected not just to fintech, the financial sector, but also to policymakers. And why I said we would jump forward, I wanted to jump forward after 2020 because I think your views have changed now of the people in charge. So maybe you could talk about that. And before we do, I just wanted to show this here, Jennifer, to you, and let me just share it to you and the viewers because you've spoken to me before about how you don't recognize this guy anymore. So I'm going to play this.
Lance Corporal Johnson reporting for duty and responding to the appeal from General Sanders for a citizen army and encouraging young people across the country to think of the attractions, advantages of some kind of military training or service. Because at the moment they think it's either uncool or unethical, or perhaps they're not following General Sanders, they're following Colonel Sanders. To find out what we need to do about it, read my column in the Daily Mail.
So hold on, let me turn this off. So Jennifer, do you think what does he know about fighting wars and military? He's probably been advised by someone like you back then who advised him about hashtags, now advising him about this. But yeah, how do you yeah, let's go back to 2020 and how what's your view of the world now? It must have changed a lot.
Absolutely, especially knowing someone as close as I was to that, whatever that is. I mean, whatever figment is left of that. I sit there gobsmacked. I mean, I remember the real man. I remember what, he used to think about. And while there might have been some kind of fantasy around, being a leader during war, whatever, I just can't what what we're seeing now is a very different, instead of having aspirations or grand ambitions, we're seeing a very or like I mean, this man is complicit. This man is compliant. This all roads lead back to corruption. I mean, there are theories. I mean, JFK or RFK Jr. has been out but talking about how he went over and forced them to tear up the peace deal that was being, discussed, and how he's been responsible for, the death of hundreds of thousands. But, we can throw around death stats and what the headlines say. I want to bring attention to your viewers, how they orchestrate and bring him back, and how they're giving him a platform now. I have said when they left, they're not done with him. They will bring him back. And I believe it now even more. They've given him the column. They've given, like, what he does best. He's a showman. So they let him, speak and do his little writing bits. And then he's got a show on GB News. This is, he is gaining favor. He is, I wrote about this on my channel. I mean, whether you like him or not, he is, one of his greatest strengths is being a showman, and his likability is kind of really what they're banking on right now, and using his brand. But to me, that man, whatever we're looking at there, that is a figment of the man I knew. That is some dark shadow, some haunted ghost. I mean, a friend of mine called him a grubbly sack of port and wine. I mean, he's just some like haunted, figment of what he was, the shadow. And yet they still have him popping up, in Ukraine, singing the warlord song and then writing about it. Now he's, I don't know what that is, trying to enlist support. I mean,
and he's pushing now war instead of fintech and business. And the one I thought as well that about that the fact that they're trying to bring him back from the wilderness, isn't that, I think, the history. I'm not too haven't studied that period that much, but I know that Winston Churchill, he had some years where he was in the wilderness, so to speak, and then they brought him back in I think 1940 to become prime minister again. It seems maybe that's what they're trying to do with Boris Johnson, but do you really think people are going to buy into it?
well, I think what we have learned now is that everyone we're seeing on the global stage, they they are controlled, they are puppets of whatever masters to whom they serve. It's not the people. And I think now we see it more than ever. And I keep saying this to my, audience on my channel, like, every one of these people, they are players, and they are playing out the role that they've been brought back in to do. This is how I see this man's role. I mean, whoever the man really was is long gone. And we've seen this. He was a showman for the Brexit, get Brexit done. Mario, do you remember me talking to you about what I was told about the Vote Leave campaign?
No, maybe you could touch up on that again.
So that there was no deal, no one in Brussels would take him seriously, but the role, there's something that happened with the votes of the Vote Leave that for the Brexit vote, that it was presented to the public as a 50-50 or 48-52 split, but actually it was a landslide leave, and that these votes were tabulated in Whitehall, Lord Mullet's office. And then do you remember that we had this whole get Brexit done, oven ready deal, but was it ever really about gaining independence? I mean, or just breaking up the financial system? And there's lots of different layers to that. So I think he was a pawn in their move there. He was an instrumental role, for which then he gains favor for party leadership, and he's sent on to do the bidding, to win the election, right? But this man completely changed, because then we head into the time of COVID, right? Where he's one way and then he's a completely different, person. And then he goes into hospital, and notice the staged births and the happily ever after narrative they're creating around this man. Meanwhile, all the wheels are falling off. I mean, his closest friends don't speak to him. They don't know him. In fact, many of them reached out to me. just to apologize on behalf of the British media and the government, and then to say, look, you're not the only one. Everybody's been cut out. This is what they do. Because they need complete control over you, head, mind, body, soul. I have never been more interested in cloning and possession and whatever it is, whatever ritual that happens, because I've never known a world leader like this to see such a change. And then now being touted on social media to repeat history, but everything we've learned about history has been a lie. And so they're kind of playing the players along. Meanwhile, we're pointing out the logic, flaws, the gaps, the points that don't make sense. And where we're different in, history to now is that we have the means to share information. Whatever they're planning to do to rewrite this man's legacy, to bring him back as a leader, so that we all conveniently forget how he pushed these gene therapies and mocked those that were hesitant, smart enough to see through the BS, the propaganda, and then seeing the way he's, kind of like lights on Boris now in Kiev and, here and there. And just, it's never screamed puppet more. Now, keep in mind, I'm in a double-edged sword speaking about this, because most people that listen to this will think I'm just some scorned bimbo, because that's what the media told them I was. And so, I'm not speaking at this from any kind of place of, scorned feelings. I'm just pointing out, very clearly what I see and what so many people have come to me over the years saying. So this is why I just feel an obligation to say, to talk about this.
Yeah, and it's interesting what you said about the referendum there, that the leave vote was a lot higher than 52%. And I always thought if they really wanted to get it done, they should have knighted Nigel Farage and appointed him as the Brexit negotiator. It would have been done very quickly and very well, but they seem to drag their feet.
They can't control Nigel. Like I was told, they can't, like Boris willingly. And he's also an incredibly emotionally weak man. That's not to say that Nigel's not. I don't know Nigel. I've known his girlfriend. Well, that's a different conversation. But I don't know him but Johnson, the Boris I knew was very, very emotionally weak. And he doesn't like confrontation, and he would not want to piss off or upset those he would have sought to gain favor from. And so if he's, in this position of the establishment where they're pressing him, or making him comply, or perhaps he was compromised. I have also been told that they got him, this, whatever it was, the sexual exploitation, which feels like the most obvious with that man, but however they got him. The other thing, Mario, I've talked about, and I'm not sure if we spoke about last time, was not only was I told about the vote leave, the deception with something happening with those votes and the tabulating with Lord Mullock. Given then fast forward to 2020, the US election, there was a lot of stuff going around about the unlawful, interception or interference of the US election, which is treason per executive order. And there was apparently a fake document that was set out by GCHQ, Robert Hannigan, basically talking about some unlawful, telling Boris, about this surveillance. But remember, it is quite known they put out documents whenever there's certain rumors or things that have leaked in ways to debunk them. So they'll put out a fake document purposely to debunk that narrative, so people stop sniffing. Oh yeah, but that was debunked. That was completely fake. But was it? Because there was a lot of suspect that I was told about the foreign laundering, the kind of the deeds he was doing while foreign secretary. And there's something about that role as foreign secretary, kind of like the entryway, to kind of grovel. It's the ultimate humiliation role that kind of gain favor. So every one of a lot of these prime ministers we see now, they put David Cameron back in the role. I mean, look at that. What a surprise.
And he was involved with this green seal scandal. It's almost like we've got all this dirt on you on green seal. So you become
Our bit.
the foreign secretary, Lord
Yeah,
Cameron, and you do whatever we tell you to do.
exactly. And I know because I remember Boris hated the role of foreign secretary, whatever they were doing, whatever, because he was like, I'm never going to see you again. They're always following me. I can't, like he just was miserable. I can't even tell you how many times he was whimpering. He just, whatever it was in that role. And that's where, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that happened, but I won't go into detail. But, it just was very obvious that this man was not in any control then, that, like I said, well, if you want to see me, you come and see me like you always have. I mean, I'm not playing this role, this game, like sneaking around, jumping in car. I don't do that. She did. That's why the press got involved. She showed the press, and dramatically jumped into cars. I wasn't going to play that, but I do remember he was very, very not happy during foreign secretary. Then we moved to the U.S. election. Then there's all this talk about unlawful surveillance of not only the U.S. and intervention in the U.S. elections, but unlawful surveillance in the U.K. under the guise of Boris Johnson as foreign secretary, right? And then again, this was all kind of whispering around, and this whole happily ever after and bringing this woman into number 10, knowing what was going on behind the scenes. I mean, I didn't really understand it until then when he starts tweeting, congratulations, Biden. And I'm like, whoa, they know this election was fake. And then the pen, and then the globalists speak, and the Davos Build Back Better script, then they're done. They're gone. They're 100% compromised at that point.
He was prime minister by then, wasn't he? Though. Yeah.
And then we move forward to that March meeting, right? 10 days before lockdown. That lawyer that was like, you need to check this out with the Bank of England, the asset purchase finance, division of Bank of England. And you're like, isn't that interesting? The same timing the corporation goes, and then they start the printing on the zombie corporate, like we go into this 2020 lockdown mayhem. Right. And then when I see him on TV mocking anti-vaxxers, that's when they're like, they had him play the clown, like go in and because that's not something he wouldn't know the first thing about it. And the other thing I'm thinking about is like, he doesn't have a poker face. So whatever was left of the man at the time, whatever fragile, invertebrate jelly they kept around, he wouldn't have been privy to. They would have kept him behind closed doors. They would not have let him know so then that's not to excuse his complicity or any kind of negligence on his part, but I'm just saying I think because they knew what a disaster he was. So then when all the things start falling off the track, they pull him out, exit stage right, bring in the next puppet. Oh yeah, we got her too, exit out. Now we got Rishi. Rishi, we know is a corporate puppet.
With rising inflation, bank failures, and massive layoffs across multiple sectors, the future of the economy remains uncertain. It's no wonder the central banks have been getting prepared by stockpiling gold. At ITM Trading, we have spent over 27 years building a team of seasoned researchers and analysts who can help you prepare for any financial crisis. Our experts are ready to provide you with proven strategies to safeguard your wealth and assets in the event of an economic downturn or currency reset, which is frankly inevitable. Don't wait until it's too late. Schedule your free gold and silver strategy call by clicking on the link in the description below.
Everyone knows this. The man doesn't have a spine. He's so bought in. He's like Matt Hancock. You just wind him up and blow him in whatever direction he floats. You know what I mean? He is just well, whichever way the line is towed, you know, he got the paycheck for, because that's Rishi. I mean, that is all he is. And it is so disgusting listening to now the political commentary take off, where, you know, it's Tory or Labor, you know, and then nothing else matters, because if it does, it's a waste of vote. And that means, you know, I was listening to them talk about it on GB News, where the Tories broke it. Now Labor is going to, you know, bankrupt it. Guys, it's all broken.
It's all
It's all
bankrupt
broken.
anyway. And yesterday, Rishi Sunak, I think it was Prime Minister's question. He replied to Andrew Bridgen's implicate. You know, Andrew Bridgen implied that he's not looking at these excess deaths, and Rishi Sunak said, "Oh, I can categorically, sorry, he's Rishi
Yeah.
Sunak said I can categorically state that the this thing is very safe." I mean, I couldn't believe he said that.
In 2024, that man has hung himself in
Yeah.
the public. I
Mm.
mean, he stands on the wrong side of history. That is going to eat him alive, that statement. And I cannot believe that there was no one to storm the gates. But this is what we have to go through. Every little exposure, lift, light bulb, even if you still thought the vaccines were great and amazing and all hail pharma, the fact that he dismissed any kind of claim that, you know, that the fact that anybody believes that one size fits all for this medicine and that there can't possibly be any altercations is just ignorance. So the fact that he's shutting it down by safe and effective, the same taglines, I mean, these guys are so bought and paid for, and this is what we're seeing. You know, I don't actually think the US election is going to happen, not to jump that far, but I do think this is going to reverberate this kind of tension that we're feeling. I mean, they're going to play the theatrics of an election, but will we actually get it? I'm not sure. So,
Yeah. So what before we go into the US, so how do you see things panning out in the UK? Because we have an election year too.
well, that was my point. Like, I don't see, if they have that election, it's to hang Rishi, and they're going to do something with Boris. But if there is election, or maybe the UK comes first and that's the election, but then ultimately the US, they need Boris right now because of his voice and his platform. His ultimate likability is their single best card. So he will be played as the ultimate card. Like, he's their, I don't want to say trump card, because he's not. He's a very no, no, no. This man is guilty on every level. But he definitely is going to be used in some way. Rishi might be their fall guy. Maybe Rishi keeps, can he get more corrupt? Every day it gets worse. So he might just be the path to no end. And then, oh my gosh, Keir, maybe they'll let Keir, but I don't think Keir's all kinds of dark money, bad news as well.
Yeah.
So I don't think they really stand a chance.
There's
I think they're
Oh, sorry. There's speculation,
so,
if you've heard this, that we could have a national government like they've had before. So even if the Conservatives didn't win the election, and they would make Boris their leader, and then he would join Labour as a national government, and maybe that's why they're pushing this war narrative.
yeah, are there war powers around with a national government?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
See, I think there's more there between our two countries with these war powers. But yes, whatever the road is, Boris is their Churchill card, or their guy that they want to bring in to be the savior. And because people are so delusional at this, I mean, they're going to be so desperate, but they'll forget what this man, you know, it's not about the party politics at this point. It's not even if you like him anymore. It's the fact that what they perceive as leadership is actually a man that's just playing a plea deal. He's just playing along. He's reading their script. That can't be a leader that we want, right? This man is complicit on so many crimes. Yet we were so desperate because they only give us a few. We'll take what, that's what, that was more or less what I was hearing. The political banter the other night was just, oh, well, there's no other way to change it. There's going to be something that has to come in, a tipping point. I mean, we can't do another rigged election on either side of the pond, Mario.
And yeah, so moving over to where you are in the US, how do you see things evolving? And why did you say you think there might not be an election? And I've heard that from many people, people that I watch online.
Yeah, I think there'll be some kind of, I mean, maybe we'll see Dementia Joe, there'll be some theatrical. I mean, look, we already see the theatrics with Taylor Swift. Okay. This is such a, again, guys, packaged for the media. She is with this football narrative. I mean, this is just complete garbage. So they're going to do something again where they, we'll have to get rid of Joe and bring in Michelle, or they'll try to use a war Mike, big Mike, or they'll use their war powers to, sitting president, and have to change leader. I mean, they're going to do whatever they can because this is the end of the road for them. I can't see, I'm listening to Greg Manarino and, a few of these other commentators about when they start printing, they're going to put bring back, pump the stock market again. So, buy into stocks. Well, my hesitation there is like, what are these stocks backed against? Like, what is the dollar? Like, because, now we're seeing Saudi Arabia and BRICS, and the dollar is going to lose its purchasing power. So they're going to, I mean, it already has, but I mean, obviously we're going to see, so we watch how this FOMC meeting's coming out that, and then they're playing this game with inflation. If the inflation rate goes down, like, will the market bounce back? And we'll see. So they're going to play the market to a certain point, but because we're dealing with zombie corporations, how long can they kick this can? Because if we're looking at, the rest of the world is turning its back on the dollar is going to be their prized, to show off this great economy coming into this election. Meanwhile, we've got a president that's losing his mind. Well, he's not president. I can say that. He's not the president. That is a complete puppet show. But the illusion of this president will be, however they play it out, where they keep him in and then they replace him and then we go to war, or they go to war and then he has some kind of stroke. We'll see it go. But I think that ultimately, because 2020 has not been taken care of, there is so much happening on the local and district level here. That's why I tell a lot of people in the UK, like, this fight didn't just end. I know a lot of people get really bored hearing about, the election fraud and, why Trump has still gained such popularity. But that's because the man has done nothing but like continued to go, city to city. And, when East Palestine had their disaster, who was there? No Joe Biden, so the popularity of this man has grown, and he continues to, speak the language of the everyday American who are just so fed up with the establishment. People saw right through Vivek. Vivek was a plant, a deep state, he too is singing for his life. But again, he's a player. I mean, like, as far as what he's been involved in, DeSantis as well, there's many layers to these men, so they're players. So they've garnered, they've done well garnering an audience. Some people resonate with them, but ultimately they are very much controlled. And I say that living in a DeSantis governed state, I saw the switch with DeSantis, and, the way people loved what he did during the pandemic, but then now see through who he is now as a leader. So we'll see. I mean,
what about Trump winning? Do you see that happening? Because
well,
throwing everything at him, but he seems to get more and more popular.
I think it's interesting. And I kind of made a comment the other day, like, now we're seeing the news channels follow the Trump rallies. They've never followed them except to like take a quick shot to call them, rednecks, right? And that's kind of how the feel is, that Trump supporters are a bunch of, outlier Florida men with guns, and just like everything that the stereotypes that they portray. But actually, it is far from the truth. I mean, they are so many different kinds of people just love this man. And, I can't say that I love any politician right now. I keep my eyes very wide open, but I recognize the role, the player that is Trump, that is going to have to, that won 2020, that has now taken 4 years to kind of unveil all the many layers of corruption. I think as we go into the fall, we're going to see it step up. The stakes get higher and higher. But I'm still of the mind that he won 2020, and I don't actually buy this Biden pretendency at all. So I think we're going to have some kind of reckoning for what happens in this new election. But we had to go through this process. This is very key. People had to see it done the lawful way. They had to see it done, without any gimmicks or strings attached. They had to watch the corruption happen in real life, to understand how it all happens in plain sight.
Yeah, it's almost as if the people running the current president are being completely exposed by what they've done, and it's woken up so many people, not just in the U.S. but also throughout the world, I think, and that's one of the reasons why BRICS is gaining so much momentum. Uh, Maybe if you have some more time, if you want to talk a little bit about what's happening in continental Europe with all the well, it's the farmers' protest, but if you go back in history, peasants have revolted many times.
Mm-hmm. And I think, this was said to be a long time ago. What's the point of being sovereign if we don't know how to govern ourselves? So we have to go through this process of fighting back, and not everybody is going to be the one with the pitchfork on the front ends, driving the tractor. Awesome. Like, I see what's happening at the Brussels Parliament, across France. They're turning roads into fields now. Yes, it makes me question, how France really responded in World War II, because we were always told, at least my, history, that they just gave in, that retirer was the one word you needed to know, that they actually just folded over. But now seeing them, and how fierce they were to protest, makes me question a lot of these narratives we were told. But if any way we can stand with British farmers, or any farmers across Europe, America, I mean, all you have to do is make your voice heard, stand up, and people, like me, Mario, we will share your story. We will continue to champion for these farmers, because I feel like this is such an important issue. I'm so glad we're talking about it. I love seeing the videos, being shared and circulated, because it gets people really thinking about, how important these farmers are. And when these politicians become the ones that try to dictate the farmers, how they stand up and respond. Don't you find it inspiring, Mario?
Yeah, and it's ironic because 200, 300 years ago, agriculture and farming was much more important for the economy, and you wouldn't have thought that it would be from the farmers, and today that maybe some kind of change would come. So yeah, I find that very interesting. And the other thing is the mainstream media is covering it to an extent, but they seem to try to skirt away from the fact that a lot of the problems with agriculture and farming is because of these regulations they're like putting for net zero and the climate change. They seem to just say, "Oh, French farmers are they're hard up. They're not earning enough. Their costs are too high." But they don't go to the crux of the problem, which is this move towards this net zero world.
I think all of that is going to backfire.
Yeah, so that's why I think, yeah, it is inspiring, and I think it's because if you control, if they can't control the food, they can't bring their fourth fourth great fourth industrial revolution or great reset, and then the next step would be I guess, energy. If they can't control energy, they can't bring that either. And then finally the money, and so my hope is that the farming and the food part will not succeed. The energy part, it looks like a lot of big corporations now are giving up on this ESG. People are finding out that EVs are not that efficient. And then the money, my hope is that the CBDCs won't work because people will see through the fact that it's the central bankers who have wrecked our system that want to bring this about. So yeah, I think it's food, energy, and money, and hopefully, they won't succeed.
You know my thoughts on CBDCs.
No, what are your thoughts? I
They're
can
not gonna,
imagine.
it'll never happen.
And you are, I mean, you're involved in this sector of fintech, right? And I remember last year when Silicon Valley Bank collapsed, their London arm collapsed, and it had to be taken over, I think, by Barclays or HSBC for £1, and a lot of the fintech companies in London would have gone under, and I think a lot of the Bank of England digital currency projects would have collapsed, and I think that's why they took over it. But I'll let you tell us why you don't think it will uh, work or come about.
I mean, and not only do I think the technology has been around, the digital ID, my husband and co-founder was, working in the cabinet office at least a decade ago when they were pushing and they had the technology for a digital ID. I mean, it's all blockchain. Now, that's not to say that payments on blockchain, everything will change. There will be certain CBDC like Fed payments, for example. You want trust. You want transparency there. You want to know where that government money is going. So tokenizing on blockchain is not the enemy, is not the bad thing. Moving to a blockchain payment system, it's the CBDCs that I think ultimately will never get the adoption because there's not the faith and trust when trust is lost, confidence lost, when this ultimately does collapse. That's not to say that we won't transact on blockchain, but I don't think these surveillance measures, these parameters, whether it's your carbon footprint or your ability to spend within 5 miles, this is a bit of code written in the application layer of these web apps. This is not synonymous with the actual technology itself. My point being that, to use, like the XRP ledger or any one of these blockchains, you don't have to have creepy, CBDC tech. That's a layer that's written in, and it's written in with the parameters of certain political agendas. But it's just like everything, they'll dangle it, they'll try it on, but it won't stick. People will snub their nose. Carbon credits, I mean, I roll my eyes when I see stuff. I did a GB News interview the other day, and on the production, like while you're waiting, it's like, congratulations, you saved blah 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 in carbon credits for doing a virtual call. I mean, unbelievable.
Yeah.
So we just, again, it needs to be in their faces, the electronics, the kind of the fault of the technology. Again, the technology that I'm seeing where we're going is not dependent on internet. It will go on or offline. It goes through radio signal, satellites. I mean, there's all different ways to transact. And we will, and right now we are constricted to a system that we are limited to custodial of our money, within the banking cartel. But as we move into blockchain and this kind of Web3, the rules change. You can choose a centralized, web app, but I believe that, the options of being able to hold your money and transact and make payments will dramatically open, innovation here. So that's why I see through the CBDC narrative. I don't see it adopting just based on how the tech works. I don't see that them gaining what they think, that they'll get, because there'll always be someone new offering it that much better without that kind of, like there's going to be this race to regulation in custody right now. There's race, with the SEC, and then we're seeing the kind of evolution of blockchain tokenization of digital assets, and the kind of evolution of the financial system take place. And that's really because the banks no longer have the control they once had. So CBDCs are sold as the carrot. Oh, come into this new system. You can, make your own token, the internal token. But ultimately, I see it as their demise. It's just the way to bring them, to motivate them into the new system. But once that system gets up and running, we don't need their creepy web apps. There'll be other people popping up, and there'll be other ways to transact without the use of a traditional bank. They'll take on more of a financial advisory role. Anyway, but
yeah.
that's how I see it.
Yeah, how do you see gold and silver in this tech world of tokenization and blockchain? Do you think there's a room for that, or it's better to keep it outside the system?
Oh no, come on. Centuries. I mean, even if I said the latter, the centuries, of history will prove me wrong. I mean, of course, it'll be a big piece of it, of course. And I think, when we move on blockchain, being able to use a range of commodities to back different assets, on different blockchain highways, will be really, really interesting and a game changer. So that not one thing, like right now, the petrodollar controls the world. Well, as we move into, a gold-backed tokenization, I think gold is going to be a big part of, kind of creating an equilibrium across currencies. And I think silver has its place too, not only in financial, but of course, industrial uses. So yes, but as we move into blockchaining and again, tokenization, there's a lot more ways we can use payments and use money in ways that we don't right now. I mean, come on, we're using antiquated technology like messaging protocols, and people think this is some kind of like, the banks are like some superior. What? No, they're just they're banking cards. It's a cartel,
Yeah.
the club.
Yeah.
But this is not some special technology. This is kept, and this is what I learned in security. It is kept insecure on purpose. They know how to fix. I mean, they know the gaps in their finance. I mean, the way that they communicate, these banks, and yet that's why I'm so positive about blockchain, because I enough with the identity fraud, enough with this. We don't know where your money went. Oh, it took 3 to 5 days. Are you serious? This is what I love about blockchain. Everything's verified. There's a transparency there. There's no missing money. There's no, created fee, all these kind of embellished fees. And there will be a decentralization that happens that comes with innovation, because the banks won't have the control that they have. I don't believe the Fed is very, I think the Fed's on life support, and the Fed, sooner it goes, the better.
Yeah.
So I think
why do you think they allowed this to happen? You said all the security problems. What have they got to gain with that? Like your money not being safe.
Right. So of course they're going to tell you, like, we spend on security because we have to ensure our assets and make sure our customers have, blah, 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 blah. We run the biggest contract. But the reality is these banks work within cahoots with each other. And as I've seen in the last few years, it's, like this whole laundering thing. I mean, yet the banking cartel, Jeffrey Epstein, these people were right there with the banks. So to sit there and act like, when Jamie Dimon's given his speech, not that I'm a Bitcoin fan at all. Don't buy Bitcoin, people. Don't gamble with antiquated tech. Speaking of which, the day to buy Bitcoin was 10 years ago, but we can talk about that another time. But when Jamie Dimon is sitting there, telling everyone that it's the drug lords, the traffickers. I mean, what about Silk Road? These guys, the government, have been using the banks as a way to launder their own criminal activities. So yes, sure, while the mid-manager, at Barclays and every other banks, will do everything they can to protect customers, assets, there is still this kind of blindsided happening in plain sight of large amounts of money that do go missing or get lost, or, happen to look this way while these people are allowed to transact. And, then they come after the little guy. Where are you spending your £1,000? Why do you want 5,000 in cash? And they make them about, them the guilty party of really what's happening on the institution level. I mean, we can go into the rabbit holes around the FBI and children and trafficking and all this, but you get where I'm
I mean, they want to try to tell the public, look, we're doing everything to fight this, but they use the small guy and they leave the big guys to do whatever they want. So yeah, not surprising.
Well, just one last point on what we were talking about to bring it back to our conversation last year, how they use those dormant companies. Remember, like they can use, they make, remember, they'll pop up these companies with people for tender. They'll get the contracts through, and then, but they'll only be open to the few friends that they let know about it. And then the companies, and then they'll create other so, in the US, it's so purposely obfuscated, the government, layers and where monies go and how it, money is funded or awarded and all this. So there are some things to be said about creating transparencies in the payments and bringing that out on blockchain so that money doesn't go missing. Because remember that 2 billion that happened, or trillion or whatever, right before 2011, planes.
Oh, 2001. Yeah.
Yeah. How many examples?
Donald Rumsfeld. Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we've seen this over and over again. We need this system to fail so we can bring back trust and confidence.
Yeah. And
yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And I'm with you 100%. Gold and silver. Go buy it. Wherever you buy it, just make sure you have some.
Just one question about gold and silver on the blockchain. How are you gonna make, because a lot of the purists will say, oh, will I be able to get delivery? Because people will say, no, can I really trust that the gold is there, even though it says so on the blockchain?
Yeah. I mean, look, we're in this world where up is down and down is sideways. I mean, if you want to rent a vault and have it there, I mean, like, I don't use those the apps that, you would buy gold, and I don't use those things, because to me, gold is your nominal holdings you hold outside, what you've saved your life, and you want it outside. You don't want it on any app, no spending app. If it's not if you don't hold it, you don't own it, really. Now I know that certain pensions and things have it, in vaults, and they can't touch it for a certain point. This is, again, down to our faith and trust into the institutions, which I have none, but some people do. So they'll pay to, put it on in a vault somewhere. Some people have to, or because of their pension restrictions, etc. But I wouldn't recommend, if you're using one of the third party, gold apps for spending, for a bit of fun, to learn about, gold on blockchain, etc., then that's fine. But I wouldn't hold your savings in gold or expect it to be there if something should happen to that third party app. Best is to hold it physically in your possession. And I like the numismatic stuff. I'm with Lynette Zhang on this. No one likes that stuff, so don't listen to me, but that's my personal preference.
So, Jennifer, thank you so much for your time. And before we wrap up, have you got anything that you'd like to tell the viewers, anything that you think is really important before we end the interview?
Well, thank you again, Mario, for having me on and speaking to me about all of this. I just want to let everybody know, really, that we can't give up, whatever happens. However hard it may be, however tired your spirit may feel, take a break, switch off, disconnect, but do not give up. And not for a second have they won. Not for a second. This battle isn't over until we win. We're the last ones standing. This ends one way. So however you can get involved, whether it's sharing a message, protecting your family's wealth, and just preparing for whatever they may do to the power grid, the financial system, the food supply. Just take it day by day and never, ever give up. That's the best advice I can give anybody right now, because we're all in this together. It gets hard, keep looking at the daily headlines, but we're in this together and we got to get through it. And it's not over until they're all behind bars. Really.
Well, I couldn't have thought of better advice. Thank you, Jennifer. And yeah, have a great day.
Good to see you, Mario. Talk soon.
Good to see
Thank you
you.
again.